Let me ask you something. When was the last time you were in a room full of people and felt completely, utterly alone? Not alone because no one was talking to you, alone because no one actually knew you. You were there, smiling, probably nodding, maybe even laughing at the right moments. But underneath all of it, some part of you was watching from a distance, thinking, nobody here actually sees me. If that hits somewhere real, stay with me because what you just described is not a personality flaw. It is not being too sensitive, and it is definitely not something that more socializing is going to fix. The US Surgeon General declared loneliness a national public health epidemic. Not a trend, not a mood, an epidemic. And the statistic that stopped me cold when I read it was this one. Nearly 3 in 5 Americans say that no one truly knows them. Not that they have no friends, not that they're isolated, that no one truly knows them. That is the loneliness nobody talks about. And today, that is exactly what we're going to get into. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have sat across from some of the most quote unquote connected people you could imagine. People with full social calendars, long term partners, group chats that never stop, who described their inner world as profoundly, quietly, exhaustingly lonely. And what I want you to understand before we go any further is this: loneliness is not about how many people you're around. Loneliness is about how much of yourself you're allowed to bring into the room. Here is what the research actually shows, because I want you to have the clinical picture, not just the cultural conversation. Loneliness is not the same as being alone. Researchers define it as the gap between the connection you have and the connection you want. You can live alone and feel completely at peace. And you can be in a marriage surrounded by coworkers, embedded in a group of friends, and feel like a ghost in your own life. The Harvard study on loneliness found that 57% of lonely people said they were unable to share their true selves with anyone. Read that again. Not unable to make plans, not without people to call, unable to share their true selves. That is a version of loneliness I see most often in my work. The performed version, the version where you've learned, consciously or not, that the full, unedited, complicated version of you is not safe to bring into most relationships. You can bring a version, curated, managed, easier to handle version, and then you feel alone because technically you are. And I want to pause here and say something that I do not think gets said enough. Performance is exhausting. Knowing how to read a room before you speak, editing yourself in real time, monitoring how you are landing, laughing when something's not funny, being agreeable when you're actually not fine at all. That's labor. And most of the people doing it have been doing it for so long they don't even notice it anymore. It just feels like being a person. But here is what is actually happening inside your nervous system. When you chronically suppress your authentic self in social situations, your body registers it as a threat. Not metamorphically, literally. Your stress response activates, cortisol goes up, and over time, the brain begins to associate connection itself with danger, which is why the loneliest people often start pulling away from exactly the connection they need. Not because they want to be alone, because their system has learned that being around people and being unseen is somehow worse than being physically by themselves. You were not built to perform, you were built to connect. Those are two completely different things, and your body knows the difference even when your mind has convinced you to keep going. So here is where I want to offer you a different frame, because I think the way we talk about loneliness keeps people stuck. The cultural solution to loneliness is almost always get out more, make more plans, join something, put yourself out there. And I understand why. On the surface, it makes sense. More people, less lonely. But if the problem is not the number of people around you, and we just established that it's not, then adding more people to the same dynamic is not going to fix it. You'll just be lonely in more rooms. The real question is not, how do I find more people? The real question is, what has made it feel unsafe to be fully yourself with the people already in your life? Because that fear, and it is a fear, even when it doesn't feel like one, almost always has a history. Maybe you grew up in an environment where your emotions were too much, where you learned to make yourself smaller so adults around you could function, where being easy and agreeable and low maintenance was what kept the peace. Maybe you've been in relationships where the real version of you is criticized, dismissed, or used against you. Maybe you have simply been performing for so long that you are not even sure anymore what you actually think, feel, or need, separate from what everyone else seems to require from you. That is not a you problem. That is a learned adaptation that made complete sense when you learned it, and it's costing you the exact thing you were longing for, the feeling of being genuinely known. So, what do you actually do with this? I'm going to give you two things, not a list of 10, not a 30-day challenge, two real things. The first one is identify one relationship in your life where you're performing the least. One person around whom you feel even marginally more like yourself. And then, in your next interaction with that person, say one true thing. Not everything, one thing. Something small that's actually real. That is where relearning connection starts. Not with a stranger at a networking event, with one person who already knows part of you and letting them know a little more. The second thing is harder, but it matters more. Start noticing the moments when you're editing yourself. Not to stop immediately, just notice it. I almost said something real here. I just laughed at something that wasn't funny. I just said I was fine when I'm not. Awareness is the beginning of a choice. And right now, if you've been performing for so long that it feels automatic, awareness is your most important tool. You're not broken because you feel lonely in rooms full of people. You're a person who learned to protect yourself by becoming whoever the room needed. And that makes sense. But you deserve a life where you don't have to do that anymore. If this gave you something real today, subscribe. Every Thursday, I show up with clinical truth delivered like your most honest friend. No fluff, no toxic positivity, just the real thing. And if you're in a place right now where the loneliness feels like more than you can carry alone, there's a link in the description to connect you with a licensed therapist online. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. I'll see you Thursday.